Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare
Hare Krishna and welcome to this our second session. Oh, there, that's better. Hare Krishna, welcome everyone to our second session of this online Vaishnavi retreat held by Sattvi Sangha. We are so very, very, very honored to have with us Vishaka Prabhu and Malati Prabhu. I'm sure you've read the bios that have been going out today and yesterday, but I'd like to do a little different introduction. Both these amazing Vaishnavis were here in South Africa some years ago and have such fond memories of that time. And the thing that sticks in my head the most is the crystal clear, sharp intelligence they present, the warm and loving feeling that you have in their presence, especially the hugs. I really remember the hugs and how connected I felt to Srila Prabhupada when they were with us. So in this session, you can put your questions in the chat box to everyone, but let's limit that to questions so it's easier for us to manage. And there will be a PowerPoint being screened, which will pop up on your screen. And I'll hand over to Vishaka and Malati for this.
Can I ask a question here? I have a few people contacting me on WhatsApp that they're not able to get in. Is there some secret I can let them know, or ignore them, or what do I do? I know them, and I'd like to have them join if they can.
Maybe if we could just forward you the ID. If they have the ID link with the password, they should be able to enter.
That's that thing that you sent out a couple days ago or something? Somehow it's not happening.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, we'll be letting in everyone from the waiting room. It may just take a little bit of while because it is quite a large volume.
Okay.
Should happen. In the interim, if we are ready to start.
Okay. So nice to see your smiling face after so long.
Sure. Okay, so I think our technical guys are doing their best to let everyone in. In the interim, if we could start, that would be wonderful.
Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne, Nirvase Sasunyavadi Paskya Tadesha Tarane. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhakta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva Titanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Thank you very much to the organizers. We're so delighted that you took it upon yourselves to make this retreat. And even though there was a tremendous influx of people, somehow we've arranged the technology so we can all participate. It's not something that we who are over 40 or 50 could have accomplished. So we're very grateful to you and very appreciative of your enthusiasm. And I wanted also to thank Krishna Rupa Prabhu for her wonderful presentation this morning. It's very powerful and important point she made. So today, Malati Prabhu and I have a slideshow called Srila Prabhupada Shower of Mercy. So I just give a few words of introduction to that. That it started, the spark for this presentation was a few years ago at the ISKCON Leadership Sangha in Mayapur. Three of us, Srila Rupa Prabhu and Malati Prabhu and myself, were asked to make a presentation about women. So we gathered all these photographs and a narrative to go with them. And we tested this in South Africa before we went to Mayapur with it. And we found the devotees were very responsive and appreciative. Ordinarily, we see so many pictures of Srila Prabhupada with his men followers, but it's so perhaps refreshing and inspiring for us to see pictures of Srila Prabhupada with his lady followers. So that's what we have for you today. Do you want to add anything, Malati, before we begin?
Just my unlimited appreciation to the organizers, and not only the organizers, those who assisted the organizers, and those who jumped on board en masse when they heard about this fantastic offering. Thank you so much.
Great. So this is, we begin with our little slideshow. Prabhupada writes in a letter to Gurdas in 1972, "So far your question regarding women, I have always accepted the service of women without discrimination." A little delay here.
Well, I could give a background to that letter while we're waiting. This was written from Vrindavan when they were literally camping out on the place where Krishna Balaram temple would soon be built. And Jamuna was basically the only lady in the group, and she was included in all the discussions about what to do, how to do it, etc. And at one point, Srila Prabhupada had written a letter to Gurudas and Jamuna, and he said, basically, Jamuna is the leader of this group. So now the group had gotten a little larger, and some of the men expressed their uneasiness about having a lady, oh my God, being part of their discussions on this new project. So Gurudas wrote that letter to Prabhupada, and this was his very eloquent, clear answer. Is it stuck or is it?
No, it's stuck temporarily, I hope.
Oh, no. You're not able to press it forward manually?
Okay, let's try this. Okay, there we go.
We actually rehearsed this very carefully. Well, here we go.
There we go.
So in this particular photo, it's clear that there is Jamuna and she's assisting Srila Prabhupada. And this is the installation of Sri Sri Radha Landanishwara, the first large deities of Radha and Krishna to be installed and worshipped in ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada had personally trained Jamuna over the previous weeks and months in the art of deity worship. And she was the one who was right there with him throughout the whole installation.
I'm afraid we have to. Yes. Well, this is Janava Devi Dasi. She was one of the artists, the BBT artists.
I'm not seeing the photos. I just see you.
Oh dear. Okay.
Does everybody else see the?
Now?
Yeah. Good.
Okay. So she was one of the BBT artists, And the system was that before the artists completed their paintings, they would make a sketch of the painting and show that to Srila Prabhupada for his approval and for any corrections or alterations that he wanted to make prior to the painting being completed.
So this is in France, in Paris. It's a very large program. You'll see a couple further slides will show you the capacity, very large. And the person who is translating for Srila Prabhupada, Devi Dasi, who was very effective at this service. And she was actually able to recollect whatever speech she had given, to the degree that when they would return to the temple, the devotees who didn't go would come to her and she could repeat everything practically verbatim. And she was herself amazed how Srila Prabhupada was so organized and disciplined in his thoughts and presentations. And also, although he didn't, you can go maybe to the next one, and he didn't speak French, but he could catch it if she said something that wasn't quite right. So that was, for her, quite astounding. And so you can see this setup on the stage, ladies on one side, gentlemen on the other, and this is the auditorium. So you can see it was a very large and a very beautiful venue.
There's a Prabhupada's letter to Himavati from 1969. In India, all the acharyas and their descendants later on acted only from the man's side. Their wives were at home because that is the system from old times, that women are not required to go out. But in Bhagavad Gita, we find that women are also equally competent, like the men, in the matter of Krishna consciousness movement. Please, therefore, carry on these missionary activities and prove it by practical example that there is no bar for anyone in the matter of preaching work for Krishna consciousness. And this is Himavati on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada.
So this Vaishnavi here is Govinda Dasi. And Govinda Dasi and her husband at the time, Gaurasunder, were a husband and wife team. That's the word we use nowadays. She would do secretarial work and some cooking. And Srila Prabhupada is now reading a letter that she had composed after taking notes. Oh my God, Carpenter is coming to do something. After taking notes, and then she would address Srila Prabhupada and give him the completed manuscript. He would read the letter and either approve it or give his put his signature on it. And another aspect here that I would like to bring out is sometimes people say that, oh, he didn't really write the letters. It was his secretaries. Well, they may have done the actual writing, but Srila Prabhupada was always in control. And he read everything and he corrected everything before he would sign his name. And you can see this is Govinda Dasi in action on a morning walk, and she's taking notes. Prabhupada's dictating, and she's walking along taking notes. And this is a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada at John Lennon's estate. And where we were living at one point before our little temple opened up. And one time while we were there, Jamuna became very ill. And so for a few days, she couldn't leave her room and she didn't see Srila Prabhupada. And on the day she finally emerged she came out of her door and she saw across the way Srila Prabhupada, and just spontaneously, no rehearsal, she called out, "Srila Prabhupada, I love you." And he paused and he said, "I know that." And this was pastime was told to be by Trivikram Swami, who was really impressed by the spontaneous, outspoken affectionate exchange between the two of them.
This is a pandal in India. Prabhupada would speak every morning and evening in front of thousands and thousands of people. And his disciples, both male and female, as you can see, Dinadadri is there, would be on the stage, participating in kirtan, the artis, and of course listening to Prabhupada's lectures. Also a morning walk in India. On the left is Srimati Devi Dasi, and on the right is Koshalya. And the ladies had ready access to Srila Prabhupada. It wasn't that they were shut out or Prabhupada did not want them there, but they were welcomed.
So this is in two parts. On the right side, there is two mothers in the background. One of them is myself with the upraised arms, and the other young woman at the time was Bhaktin Denise, very shortly to become Draupadi Devi Dasi with her little son who became Dhruvananda. And the child holding the hand of Srila Prabhupada is my daughter Saraswati. And she pretty much had carte blanche to interact with Srila Prabhupada. But during the morning walks, I was generally cooking for the devotees, so she had to stay with me. And one morning she was by the door and she heard Prabhupada coming, and she started jumping up and down, "Prabhupada, Prabhupada." Now the door was one of those kind of doors where there's the top half opens and the bottom half can remain shut, if you like. And in this case, the bottom half was shut to keep her inside. But somehow, as she was jumping up and down and calling out, "Prabhupada," the door got open and she zipped right out and grabbed Srila Prabhupada's hand. And he looked at her and he said, "Saraswati, you're not properly dressed." Because it was cool out, and you can see he had a warm coat. He had on his Wellingtons, the big rubber boots that are common in England. So she turned her head and looked at me, and without saying a word was like, "Get my coat, get my boots," which I did. And she put them on, and when I was trying to put them on, she still wouldn't let go of Srila Prabhupada's hand. So one arm got in the jacket, and then she took that arm and held his hand, and then with the other arm put it in. So she was very attached to his presence. And actually there's going to be an article about her in an upcoming Back to Godhead. So I don't know which issue, but because sometimes people ask me about her. But she was very, well, I think a lot of kids were privileged. The children actually had easy access to Srila Prabhupada and his affection. So on the other side is Madhuri Devi Dasi, and again, a very large program in attendance. And again, ladies were part of it. We were part of the picture. We didn't even think it would ever be otherwise.
Here also we're at a large program, and Jamuna Devi is leading the kirtan. Behind her is Didanath Prabhu playing the mridanga.
This is, I don't know when or where, but Prabhupada is present. And sometimes he'd just randomly call out someone to either lead a kirtan or to speak. And there was no questions or rehearsals. It just would happen quite spontaneously according to Srila Prabhupada's inclination at the time. So again, we see on the right, Jyotirmayi Devi Dasi. She was not only translating for Srila Prabhupada during his public outings in France, but she was also the first one to take up the task of translating into French. And she was the headmistress of the Gurukul in Nouvelle Mayapur, the French castle/farm community. And here she's sitting under this magnificent ancient oak tree, which was so old that it was present during the French Revolution, which began in 1779. And under this same tree, Srila Prabhupada used to sit. And he gave the first initiation at the farm under this tree. So it's a very fortunate tree. And on the other side, you can see again, there's Madhuri, and she's assisting Srila Prabhupada during a fire yajna.
This is Prabhupada in an airport, waiting either to depart, probably to depart. And he would use these times just prior to boarding the airplane to have some very sweet exchanges with his disciples, as you can see. Prabhupada's expression is so endearing.
So this is in Mumbai, before the Juhu temple was established. And this lady, Dr. Indira Shringi, she was very affectionate with all of the devotees, very caring towards us, which was a good thing because we were in our beginning experience of living in India and not always really comprehending how to navigate the different health challenges. So her kindness upon us was very much appreciated, but she also appreciated Srila Prabhupada immensely so. And she was one of the few who never tried to argue with him. She took the humble position.
So this is Vishaka Devi Dasi receiving her Gayatri initiation in Sridham Mayapur from Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada very patiently was explaining how to pronounce each of the Sanskrit words. And I was fumbling with that. I didn't pronounce properly, but Prabhupada was very kind about it and patient, and would repeat it when necessary, and should have repeated it many more times, but I probably gave up on me.
Well, I would like to say something. These two photos to me are just really iconic in that Vishaka Devi came to India as Jean Greiser. She was young, but she already had a book about a particular type of photography, macro photography, something like that, police book, and absolutely minus zero interest in Krishna consciousness. And moreover, she was an affirmed, avowed atheist. So here you have this profound atheist, fast forward, receiving Gayatri Mantra, becoming a Brahmani by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada.
It's a great testimony, definitely, to Srila Prabhupada's mercy and his blessings on fallen souls. So I was fortunate that I had studied photography in college, and I was able to use my camera as an excuse to go on morning walks with Srila Prabhupada, which I did as much as I possibly could.
Your camera was like your passport to the morning walk or wherever else Srila Prabhupada might be.
Yeah, thank goodness for that. I used it at every possible occasion.
This was just a photograph from the manor, early days manor. And the lady in white, Swati Devi Dasi, came with a little son already. And she began to voluntarily live a simple life with the devotees, and included wearing a white sari. And Prabhupada was pleased with her behavior. He mentioned it somewhere in a letter to someone. You know, he was noticing her mood of chaste behavior and her sincerity in practicing Krishna consciousness. And here, Bhaktivedanta Manor, the first arti to Sri Sri Radha Gokulananda, and being performed by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Again at the manor in exchange with one of the little lady Vaishnavis.
This is Tushti Devi Dasi at the time of her initiation. She became one of the elementary school teachers at the school in the next to New Dwarka in Los Angeles. This is also Los Angeles on the right. Prabhupada is leaving for a morning walk, and the ladies come and give him flowers to enjoy. Also in New Dwarka, the devotees arranged for this room in one of the apartments to be a little grocery store. And when Prabhupada toured New Dwarka, he also toured this little devotee grocery store.
So this is one of the many photographs series of events that took place on the roof in Juhu before the temple was born. And they would, in the evenings when Prabhupada was in residence, he would go up to the roof, and anyone, including the residents of the compound where we were now taking ownership, they could also come, and they did come. And notably, the young ladies were very enchanted with Srila Prabhupada. And they would come and offer, as you can see here, offer a little dance. And on the far left in the turquoise sari, this was Mrs. Warrior, also known to this day actually as Baby, because she was the youngest in the family, so they always called her Baby. But she was the one who pulled her entire family, her mother, her father, etc. Whole family became devotees because of her. And actually her daughter her daughter is married to Yogeshwara's son, and her daughter Sundari, and lives in our Alachua community. This is another rooftop exchange. Actually, on a personal note, I was at one of these rooftop darshans, and I had a mission in my mind. I'd come to the conclusion I could not possibly be a proper mother in terms of saving my child, my daughter Saraswati, from repeated birth and death. And I thought the only thing I could do would be to get her initiated by Srila Prabhupada. So that night, when everybody left, I was still sitting there. So he motioned for me to come forward. And he goes, is there, like, if I had something to ask or say? And I just blurted out, Srila Prabhupada, would you initiate Saraswati? No preempt, no, I just blurted it out. And he actually said something very interesting. He said, they are already initiated. Now, you would have thought that I would have asked, what do you mean? But I was just so focused on getting her initiated by Srila Prabhupada. I said, but will you initiate Saraswati? So he just said, bring beads. Well, I had them with me, so I handed him the beads, which he chanted on. And then he was handing them back to me, and he said two things. He kept her name. Her name will be Miss Saraswati Devi, which was the name he gave her at birth. And then he said, she may sit in at the next fire yagya and complete the initiation then. So she was in America at that time, going to the Gurukul. And later on, she came to Europe, and she was initiated during a deity installation of Radha Gopinath in Amsterdam. And Jayatirtha Prabhu was like the deity worship acharya at the time, so he officiated, and he asked, okay, so with the 4 rules and regulations, and she's repeating, and the last one was no illicit sex. And when she said that, everybody kind of laughed because she was just a young girl, 7 years old. So this is a wonderful, sweet Dallas pastime. The young lady getting the favor of Prabhupada's mercy in the form of some sweet is the daughter, Chandramukhi, is the daughter of the lady in the back, Nandarani Devi Dasi, with her hands together, looking as happy as a mother could look, seeing their child interacting with Prabhupada. But the sweet interaction that I want to narrate to you is that when Prabhupada first arrived at Dallas Temple, the deities were closed. And Rani was thinking, but he's going to want to see the deities. So she like broke away from the group and ran into the temple room and opened the curtains. And practically at the same moment, Srila Prabhupada entered the door. And he looks up, and she was so thrilled to see that he was there. And she's thinking, what is he going to say about the deities? You know, that's what pujaris are always wondering, what will he say? What will he think about the deities? But what did he say? He said, Nandarani, you are here. And when she heard that, tears shot out of her eyes just like a syringe. And the person who narrated this to me, who told me about it, was Aditya Devi Dasi, who left her body a couple of years ago in Vrindavan. But she said, just by witnessing that sweet exchange, she also started crying.
Sikandini was a very enthusiastic book distributor in the Manhattan Temple, Henry Street. And this is Prabhupada departing from the airport and having this wonderful little exchange with her. You can see here Ramapad Swami, Bhavananda Prabhu. This is Gopal Krishna Maharaj here. Many wonderful, wonderful devotees.
So here is a big program in Rome. Just as previously we had the big program in Paris, where Jyotirmaya Devi Dasi was translating. Here in Rome is Ali Krishna Devi Dasi doing the honors and service of translating for Srila Prabhupada. And Ali Krishna was the first to begin translating for Srila Prabhupada into Italian, his books. And to this very day, she is still assisting in that manner, assisting the BBT by translating newer works into Italian. And you can see that she would always be watching him very closely, watching his expression in order to interpret and translate it into the right mood. This is on the left, those from UK and other places will know Vishwadevi. And then next to her is Srimati, who, anybody's been to Mayapur, knows the lady with the elephants, and that's Srimati Devi Dasi. And this picture was from Sweden, a morning walk in Sweden. So this humble black and white picture speaks volumes. This is Calcutta. Although you can't see the deities themselves, but you can see the altar where Radha Govinda are standing. And to the far right, you just can see the little edge coming out is Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa sign. And who is giving class here in Calcutta is Her Grace Kausalya Devi Dasi. For those persons who think women should not be giving classes.
So we have a Prabhupada's letter to Shama Dasi from 1968. So far as girls or boys lecturing in the morning, that doesn't make any difference. Either girl or boy devotees may deliver lecture if they choose to do. We have no such distinction of bodily designations, male or female. Krishna consciousness is on the spiritual platform. As such, anyone who is a devotee of the Lord, following in this line of disciplic succession, can deliver lecture on the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, etc.
Joy.
Here we see Himavati Devi Dasi in the presence of a Swami at that time, Kirtanananda, and also her husband, Hansadutta, and also His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And she is speaking to the assembled guests and devotees.
Hansadutta Prabhu, just matter of point of information, left his body sometime last week or maybe the week before. Long-time searcher of His Divine Grace, particularly in the early years, he was really pivotal in opening temples such as Montreal and in Germany. So this young lady receiving supreme benediction from Srila Prabhupada, for years we were trying to find out who is this girl, such a fortunate girl. And maybe it was a year or two ago, I happened to show this particular slide to someone who I thought might have a clue. And they told me, yes, they knew who she was, that her mom had a kind of unusual occupation. And not one that you'd normally associate with devotees, but somehow she was attracted to Krishna consciousness and she began to attend. And then the devotees found she had a child and said, bring her here. And the child, this little girl, quickly adapted. And Srila Prabhupada genuinely gave her his blessings.
On the left with the camera is Nityatripta Devi Dasi, photographing Srila Prabhupada. She was active not only in photographing, but also in archiving. And now she is still archiving at Bhaktivedanta Archives and is very instrumental and pivotal in keeping Prabhupada's visual images properly organized, properly preserved, and also giving them to devotees for different projects around the world.
I've been told there's over 31,000 images of Srila Prabhupada that have been archived. So this is a very sweet pastime. This is in Iskon Potomac. And the young lady is Kim Waters. And Kim was an extremely talented artist, writer, musician, and very, very a very natural quality of humility. And her husband at the time, her partner at the time, was an equally qualified, maybe even more well-known than she was. He had some background in music. His name was Hans. And she got this idea one time of making an illustrated version of the Bhagavad Gita, because her art is just really, really beautiful, almost mystical. So they decided that if they were going to do that, if she was her idea, if she was going to do that, they really needed to get the blessings of Srila Prabhupada. And for that reason, they traveled together to New Vrindavan, where he was at the time. And there were so many hundreds of devotees there, they were kind of in despair. How would they ever even get close to him? You know, how would they be able to ask him? And they were standing outside after the program when Prabhupada came out the door. So the opportunity arose. And actually, it was her husband who explained what she wanted to do. Prabhupada just looked at them both, but he looks at her and he used his cane for emphasis, tapping the ground. He said, "Just do it." So that "just do it" was the go-ahead and his blessings combined. And now she's showing him the beautiful illustrated Bhagavad Gita, the results of just doing it. And this book is still available, by the way. So this little shot here speaks volumes in how Srila Prabhupada could communicate effectively from people of all cultures, backgrounds, and religious experiences. And this lady, this nun, was just listening with full attention. She was genuinely interested. Now, this is part of a series, but there's a couple other photos that aren't here, and I call it, the Janaki ticket pastime. So this is at an airport in San Francisco. Behind Janaki, with his head kind of cut off, is her husband Mukunda. Next to Mukunda, Rishikeshananda, and next to Rishikeshananda, Rishikeshananda hadn't been initiated at that point, but he became initiated, and then Kirtanananda. So Prabhupada was sitting there, the devotees were behind the railing area, and he had his ticket in his hand, because in those days, there was no electronic tickets. You had to have that little piece of thick paper. And she came up behind him and she snatched his ticket out of his hand. And she goes, "Now, Swamiji, you can't go because I have your ticket." And then Prabhupada, in another picture, what we don't have here, he looks up at Mukunda with this wide-eyed expression that also said, without saying it, "Do something," because with Janaki, she had this amazing relationship that on one hand almost seemed casual, but was very, very deep. It was just based on her love of Srila Prabhupada, and he loved her in return. But he knew that she was quite capable of being a little naughty. In fact, in one letter to Jamuna that was typed and signed by him in his own hand at the bottom, he asked, "And how is my naughty daughter, Janaki?" So when Janaki said, "No, you can't go, I have your ticket," I mean, you couldn't be sure what she was going to do. So he looked to Mukunda, and then she gave the ticket back, and this is the aftermath. They're all happy. Oxford is a place in the UK with a very prestigious university, and also the Oxford Project, which is involving academia people in Krishna consciousness on the academic level. But the kirtan here was one of those elevating experiences where everybody, including Srila Prabhupada, was up on their feet, dancing and chanting the holy names. And for Oxford, this was the first and last visit of His Divine Grace. Here was a genuinely extraordinary occasion, at least from my perspective. What you can see here, this is in Conway Hall in the UK. Just point out in the back is Dhananjaya, and then maybe you can use the cursor, Vishaka. Dhananjaya, and behind Dhananjaya, although his head is kind of cut out of the photo, that is Trivikram Swami. And then down in the lower part is myself, and behind is one of the other early devotees. So Srila Prabhupada was driven to this program from Ascot. Ascot is outside of London, and it's where John Lennon's estate was, and we were all living there together with Srila Prabhupada at the time. We only had one vehicle, which was totally funky. It was like a tiny little toy truck that had a back end that wasn't covered, although Shamsundar kind of built a canopy over it. And we would travel in that little truck here and there for programs. But we felt that wasn't really an appropriate conveyance to bring Prabhupada to this Conway Town Hall meetings. There was a series of meetings. And we rented a car. And along with the rental of the car came a driver. It was like a 2-in-1 package. So the driver's name was Eddie. And he never really gave any indication whatsoever that he was even interested in what was going on, that he was even interested in knowing more about Srila Prabhupada. He just kind of like this ordinary English bloke. He just did his job. Opened the door for Prabhupada, shut the door, got in, drove him wherever he had to go. And then, so he would wait while the speaking was going on, and he'd sit at the back of the room so that when he saw the meeting was over, he'd be out there by the car with the door already open, so Prabhupada wouldn't have to wait on him. So that this particular evening was one of, you can say, a classic, you are not this body, you are spirit, soul, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord Krishna type of lecture. And somehow or other, it sparked something, not only in the audience, but also in Srila Prabhupada. And he stood up to dance during the final kirtan, which normally he didn't stay always for that final kirtan, but he did so on this occasion. And I was standing right there, as you can see by the stage, and I suddenly noticed that his feet were not on the ground, although he was dancing. And it was just astounding. And at practically the same moment, it became apparent to the members of the audience, and people just jumped up spontaneously. So after that was over, Prabhupada, as if nothing extraordinary out of the ordinary had happened, he goes out to get in the car. I'm already in the car along with the servant Purushottam and my daughter, because we also would get there before Prabhupada would get there, so he wouldn't have to wait on us. And I was going back with Srila Prabhupada because I would prepare his evening snack. So he's standing, and he's by the door's open, Prabhupada gets in, he shuts the door, he goes around, he opens his door, he gets in, takes out his key, and suddenly he pauses, and he looks, he turns his head to Prabhupada, he goes, well, Prabhupadre, kind of got the name a little mispronounced, well, Prabhupadre, you got a little out of control tonight, didn't you? And he nudged him with his elbow. And it was such an unexpected gesture. And I remember Purushottam was thinking, rebirth material. He actually said it, like as if that was like really offensive, like rebirth material. And then he turns and he starts to put the key in the ignition. You can hear that happening. And then he pauses again. And he goes, but it's just like you say, this car is no good without a driver. And I remember feeling kind of like tingles going up and down my spine, because I thought, my God, he's listened, he's been listening, and he totally gets it. The car is no good without a driver. The body without the soul is useless. The Srila Prabhupada had this extraordinary capacity to reach across gender boundaries, or boundaries of social or educational boundaries, and connect with people in a way that they could actually get the message. This was at our little temple room in Tittenhurst. There was an initiation and a marriage that Denise became and her husband were initiated. Devananda and Draupadi, and it was kind of a, then they had the marriage. And so we're all there. And I was tasked with minding the son, Dhruvananda, during the wedding. Prabhupada looks up, he goes, "Oh, the child is here?" "Oh," he said, "the child should not see the parents' marriage. Generally, the child comes after the marriage." But it was said in such a kind of like sweet manner. So I took Dhruvananda and we went outside.
We have a little series here of Prabhupada and his followers exchanging garlands. Here you see Prabhupada garlanding a life member. And he also blesses her with a pat.
So I really like this little photo story here, because you can see Srila Prabhupada in the passenger seat, and you see Jamuna Devi in the behind, in the back seat. This was the occasion after the first large outdoor Pandal program in Delhi, that we were all going for the first time together to Vrindavan. Nobody in those days would ever consider going anywhere on our own, like touristy or sightseeing. We just didn't do that. We were there to serve the mission, to serve Srila Prabhupada. So wherever we were sent, that's where we would go. And of course, we wanted to go to Vrindavan, but we were satisfied to wait for the occasion that Prabhupada would bring us there. But after that big program, Jamuna was like totally wiped out. She was actually a little sick. And Prabhupada noticed and he said, "You come with me in the car," because we had this fantastic bus. It was air conditioned. It was air conditioned, meaning there was no glass in the windows. And the seats were just wooden slats, wasn't what you call a first class bus. And the funny thing is, Prabhupada ended up on the bus because at one point, the car he was riding in broke down. So we all entered Vrindavan together on that bus. So another point here is, you see Prabhupada has a watch on. He was very, very particular about punctuality. And actually, I could give quite a few stories, time related, but now's not the moment. But this watch was given to him. And if somebody would bring a new watch, he generally would take the old one off and he'd either give it to the person as prasad or later give it to someone else. And he didn't look and go, "Oh, well, this watch is not as valuable as the one I have on, I won't take it." He didn't have that type of mindset at all. And a few years ago at the GBC meeting in Mayapur, Pragosh Prabhu, who's the GBC rep for UK, he was our chairman. And he had decided to have an open house. Like in the old days when there was the monarchies, there would be one day set aside that the general public could come, anyone could come and come before the king and say whatever they wanted to say. And usually, it would probably be complaining. So the first person to come in was some boy, and he had a complaint. His complaint was that he thought the GBCs should not wear fancy watches. And I'm thinking, fancy watches? Man, my watch came from Walmart, and I know quite a few others their, you know, their watches are like at a similar level. And I just felt like I had to say something in defense of my godbrother, DVC fellow godbrother. So I stood up and I mentioned that, you know. So he goes, well, Gopal Krishna Swami has a Rolex. And Gopal Krishna Swami goes, but Srila Prabhupada gave me this watch. And this was the watch that Prabhupada is wearing now, that he gave to Gopal Krishna Goswami, who has faithfully kept it running till this very day by taking good care of it.
So we continue with our series of Prabhupada receiving garlands from different devotees. This is Balai in New York. Kaushalya, somewhere in India. And again, a life member in India. And here, Srila Prabhupada is garlanding Saraswati Devi Dasi.
And just for those who might want to know, little Saraswati Devi Dasi will be 52 in June next month.
Himavati receiving a garland.
So this is a very beautiful photograph of Srila Prabhupada during that time that we went into Vrindavan with him. And probably you can tell this is Varshana. And you know, Varshana, they have these little carriers that people can sit in, and then there'll be a coolie on both ends, and they'll bring you up the steep stairs. So I remember they were discussing whether or not, you know, Prabhupada should try to walk up the stairs or he should take one of those little palanquins. And it was decided he should take a palanquin. And naturally, our gung-ho boys, they wanted, his disciples, they wanted to be the ones to carry the palanquin. And that was another round of discussion. And finally, the palanquin carriers agreed because the devotees agreed to pay them anyway what the amount would be. But they came along and they were there. And, you know, like Jud Bharat was giving the king a rocky ride, well, these boys were giving Prabhupada a rocky ride too. So at one point he just stopped and he goes, okay, you've had your fun. Now let these locals do it. So then the local palanquin carriers finished taking him up the side of the mountain. Now, next on the side is Madhura Devi Dasi. She joined at 17, young girl up in Buffalo, New York. And she got married in the same time. She was still 17 when she got married. And she married a devotee named Tejas, who became the president of the small temple at the time in Delhi. So one time he decided that he wanted to take sannyas. Now by this time, Madhura's maybe 18 or 19. So they go to Prabhupada and Prabhupada's looking at him and looking at her, you know, and it's like Madhura was par excellence in cooking, par excellence in playing mridanga, par excellence chanting bhajans. Very accomplished for such a young girl. So he's looking and he goes, why do you want to take sannyas? And he said, because my wife won't do what I tell her to do. So Prabhupada nodded and he goes, well, your wife is a very intelligent girl. You can do what she says.
Here we see the ladies dancing for kirtan. Sometimes we've heard that ladies today are told, oh, you shouldn't dance, it's not chaste. But Prabhupada was pleased by his disciples chanting and dancing with great joy. So I'm not sure where this idea comes from, but certainly those of us who were with Prabhupada never experienced anything like that, either hearing him say anything like that or reading anything that he wrote?
He would actually, when he would see us dancing, boys or girls, he would smile and nod his head in encouragement. Continue, continue. Yeah.
The process is chanting, dancing,
Yeah.
feasting. Everyone is meant to dance.
I saw a thing recently on Facebook where, I mean, it's amazing. This is like 50 years plus in the movement. So where do people get these bees in their bonnet, like start thinking things like this? So the new thing is that actually nobody should dance during Mangal Arti. Right? So, you know, these, I call it PP, post-Prabhupada, these post-Prabhupada additions to our established spiritual practices must be very carefully scrutinized. And if they're obviously and blatantly contrary to what Prabhupada taught us and what we experience with him, they should be blatantly neglected.
It's quite worrisome to find all these new ideas coming out
I
such a
know.
really short time after Prabhupada left us. This is on the rooftop in Juhu. These are neighboring ladies who came to offer their respects and gratitude to Srila Prabhupada.
One time, one of our god sisters who had just arrived in India joined one of the rooftop darshans. And from where she was sitting, the setting sun was banging right into her eyes. And she couldn't avoid that sun in her eyes. And she was trying not to squirm. And, you know, because she didn't want to be noticed particularly. But then Prabhupada looked right at her. And he looks at her and he goes, "You're not comfortable." And he calls her forward to sit next to him. So he was always aware of the presence of his disciples, the lady disciples, and he was aware of the comforts or discomforts being experienced and ready to remedy. Anybody want to take a guess what this little setup is? It looks like, you know, a temple and then some other buildings. So this is actually the first prototype for the Temple of Vedic Planetarian. This was the first plan, you could say. And Prabhupada wanted it to be just on display at this large Pandal program to let people know what we were doing. And of interest, you can see who is leading the kirtan is Kaushalya Devi Dasi. And there's thousands of people, it's not like a handful, there's thousands of people there. And he would quite often request Kaushalya Devi to lead the Guru Puj, either in Calcutta and or Mayapur. She had such a sweet, charming innocence, and he very much appreciated her efforts. And also, one time during a darshan, do you want to tell that one, Iso?
Yeah, go ahead. That was the one.
Okay, so it was in a darshan in his room, he was speaking, and the Upanishad had just come out fairly recently, and he asked if anybody knew any of the shlokas, and nobody said anything. None of the men said anything. And Kaushalya raised her hand, and she'd memorized all 18 of the verses, and she said, I can chant, Prabhupada, I can chant. So he had her chant in front of all the boys and all the guests who were there, because she's the only one who had read them and learned them at that point.
Prabhupada's morning walk in Vishaka, he stopped there to visit the Gaudiya Math there that was run by one of his godbrothers, B.V. Puri Maharaj. And it was right by the ocean, so every morning a small group would take walks with Prabhupada on the ocean front.
What was the one before that? Was it the Gosala?
Yeah, it's the Life Members Goshala.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. It wasn't out of ego that Prabhupada liked to be surrounded by his devotees. It was out of love and affection, which was reciprocal. This is Jamuna, again, discussing dynamics of the soon-to-be deity installation, because you can see this was the altar, but they're not on it yet. And then you see these two pillars. There's no connecting board on the pillars, although one was finally placed there. Maybe some of you are familiar with the story that during the installation of Radha Landanishwara, the pillars began to wobble. And on top of the platform, on top of the pillars, was Jagannath Subhadra and Baladev. And everybody's in their like state of ecstasy, and they're not noticing what's happening, except for Srila Prabhupada. And he literally leaped off of his Vyasa sign, and he began to hold on to steady one of the pillars, and indicating by his visual expression and eye movement, someone else get up here and help. Because if that thing had gone down, all of the deities would have been, it would have been terrible. So anyway, this was before that dramatic installation, and Prabhupada is going over details with Jamuna, and Tamal, Krishna, and Mukunda, both married at the time, were also in attendance.
Here we see on the right is Shalavati Devi Dasi. She was head pujari in Dwarka for many years. Prabhupada would sometimes send pujaris to her to learn how to worship up to the standard that he wanted. And on the left is Vrinda Devi Dasi and Dharmada Devi Dasi, who were very instrumental in the Fate Museum, the first American theistic exhibit that Prabhupada so much wanted. So Lavati is getting personal instruction from Prabhupada regarding deity worship here. And Sarvamangala is in Juhu,
Hari Bol.
Arti to Sri Sri Radharasa Bihari.
They were in a little tin shack. This is before the temple was built.
Welcoming Prabhupada on his arrival in New York. Always an ecstatic time.
So on this occasion, this was another Conway Hall Leela, Jamuna was asked by Prabhupada to lead the last kirtan, and he often did request her to lead the kirtans. So she was doing that, and he was staying for the kirtan, and then he started singing something over her singing. And she couldn't get it at first, and she kind of like looked at him, and he indicated she should continue singing. But what he was singing was Narada Muni Vajaya Vinarikaramanarame. So, it was just like a little bit bewildering. And later on, she asked him about that. And I hope I have the right story in the right order, because there's a few stories about Prabhupada and Narada Muni, but he just said, oh, you did not see Narada Muni came. And actually in the London temple, if you take darshan at London Ishwara's temple, on each side of the altar, you'll see these little upholstered chairs, little like small chairs. One is for Lord Brahma and the other is for Narada Muni. And at the request of Srila Prabhupada at the time of installation, he said that these chairs must be there in case they were to show up. So Manmohini Devi Dasi, early devotee. She has a stainless steel bowl full of beautiful red rose petals, and they're greeting Prabhupada at an arrival in the airport. She's distributing rose petals. Later on, she had the unusual distinction of becoming the first widow, the first lady whose husband passed, the first widow in ISKCON. And she had a small child, she's a baby, like a little baby at that time, a little daughter. And as she started processing what had happened, because it was a little traumatic, actually he'd been murdered, processing what happened, she was thinking how she really enjoyed being a mother. She liked that. And she was realizing she would maybe like to have more children, which would then mean, you know, getting remarried, but she didn't know would that be proper or not. So her brother, who's also a devotee, said, let's go ask Prabhupada. So there was an appointment made, and they went up the stairs. This was in LA. She went up the stairs and tapped on the door lightly, opened up, and they're making their obeisances. But before they could say anything, they had not even opened their mouth practically. Prabhupada said, so, would you like my advice? Now, what are you going to say to your spiritual master? No, you know. But if you say yes, you better be prepared to carry out that advice. So this is going quickly through her mind, but she said yes. So then Prabhupada said, so it didn't work the first time. What guarantee is there it will be any better the second time? Guarantee is there? So he said, better you take nice care of your daughter, raise her to be Krishna conscious, you know. And she understood what he was saying, and so the thoughts were dropped. And interestingly enough, so she didn't remarry, but she became a mother to several grandchildren, thanks to her daughter. So anyways, when Prabhupada said that, well, what guarantee will it be? Her brother said, well, I think that she's worried about being protected. And then Prabhupada had this completely compassionate, concerned look on his face, and he leaned forward. He goes, you do not feel protected? And then he leaned to the brother, you do not feel protected? Was very concerned by this. But of course, everybody in the presence of Prabhupada was protected and felt protected.
I think if we're going to leave time for some questions, we have to
Speed up.
speed up a little bit here.
I can do this quickly. John Lennon's estate, Jamuna was sitting outside Prabhupada's quarters, and Prabhupada would be singing sometimes just alone, him and the harmonium, or sometimes maybe one of the servants would be there, Kartal and our Mridanga. But Jamuna was sitting outside, and she didn't think that he knew that. But one day he came to the door and he opened and he goes, Jamuna, what are you doing? And she said, listening, I'm listening to you sing, Prabhupada. And he said, would you like to come in? And of course. And then he said, okay, you play Mridanga to Jamuna. He had Jamuna play Mridanga. Whoever else was there play Kartals, and he's on the harmonium. And he was singing Hari Hari Bifale. So after that session was done, and this is Jamuna recording Prabhupada singing, which might have been at another time. But after it was done, he asked her, what is your favorite song? And she said, Shastastikam. And then she asked him, Prabhupada, what is your favorite bhajan? And he said, this one, Hari Bifale.
This is in Surat. Very early on, the devotees went to Surat and were wonderfully received by the townspeople. They would have kirtan through the streets and be garlanded by the townspeople and worshipped with incense and different arti paraphernalia, and hosted at many life members' homes.
So aside from the fact that here's a glorious Harinam going on in Boston, just point out you'll see basically 3 colors of saris. Yellow and yellow and yellow, lots of yellow. Some saffron or peach colored and one white. Somewhere during Krishna Rupa's talk, there was somebody asked about the women wearing, I mean, call it what you want. I call it pale desert sunset or saffron or whatever. The men don't own that color, and neither do sannyasis. It's a quite common color everywhere in the world. And at the time, unmarried ladies also always wore saffron. This was at Prabhupada's time, in Prabhupada's presence. You know, they weren't married, so they wore saffron. And there was no idea of acting like they were some great renunciate, but they were renounced. They were living a celibate brahmachari life of service. Now, the yellows is another story, because it was one of those things that even though there wasn't internet, the message got out all around the world really fast that Prabhupada said the grihastas should wear yellow. Well, more or less he kind of said that. What happened was one of the devotees, one of the early New York members, was noticing how the devotees looked really mishapped, mismatched when they'd go out onto Harinam, and it didn't really make such a nice appearance. People said, oh, it looks like they're wearing bed sheets, and quite frankly, sometimes that was the case. So he bought a bolt of fabric. The fabric was white. He showed Prabhupada, and he said, you know, he wants to have everybody dressed uniformly, and Prabhupada agreed that was a good idea. And he said to him, you may dye it saffron. The thing is, he was a cook. He was an early cook, personally trained by Prabhupada. And he knew that when you put saffron in the milk, it turned orangish. Yellowish, quite a bright yellow, actually. So he dyed that entire bolt of material this bright yellow. And he brought it to show Prabhupada. And Prabhupada kind of chuckled, and he explained that actually the saffron color he was talking about was like the same color he was wearing, this orangish color. But so as not to waste all that fabric, he said, so the grihastas they can wear. But that got interpreted as like an order that the grihastas must wear, but it was just not the case. It wasn't an order, it was just a practical solution to a mistake, not to waste the material.
Here we have Gauri Devi Dasi being trained by Prabhupada in deity worship. Gauri was also an expert book distributor. Although originally she was quite shy, she got over that and distributed books wherever she was, and was also very good at deity worship.
Actually, those deities that are being dressed and taught, they were her personal deities, which was not always the case in those days, but she got Prabhupada's blessings in his teaching. And Gauri died of cancer a number of years ago, but the deity worship of her deities has gone on uninterrupted, and they're now being cared for by Tadit, who's the wife of the temple president in LA. New Vrindavan Bhagavad Dharma Discourses Ki Jai. So Chandravali Devi Dasi, an early god sister, joined in 68, early was initiated. And it was thanks to Chandravali Devi Dasi that the concept of having brahmacharini ashrams arose, because the men were living together in the temple, which, I mean, this was San Francisco, and there was only one room on the ground floor and a basement that used to be a coal storage basement. So it's not like there was some kind of fantastic setup for the men, but at least they could be together and they could fully engage in all the temple activities. And she was seeing how all the ladies were, they're living here and there, here and there, and each lady had to have some kind of job to support their little, you know, apartments, etc. So she was feeling that it would be much advantageous if all the ladies could live together, all the brahmacharinis. And she asked Prabhupada, and he gave his blessings. So she's the one who got the ball rolling on the brahmacharini ashrams. And then later on, she started translating the Bhagavad Gita into Spanish. She was like a mixed background, which in those days was kind of tough. People were more racially motivated against people that were either not black or white. And she was African-American, Mexican, and Caucasian, so a little bit of a mixture. But she got the ball rolling also by starting the translations of Bhagavad Gita. And then she wanted to go to Mexico to try to establish a temple there. And initially Prabhupada said it was okay, she could do that. But then he called her back later and he said that, you know, you're taking care of these ladies so nicely, and if you're going to leave, that may be disruptive, so better you stay. And so she accepted that. But then later on, she got married to Chitsukananda, and together they pioneered the first temple in Mexico City. And she left her body a few years ago. This is probably one of the mothers. Prabhupada is, you know, greeting her.
So, Prabhupada with Kaushalya on a morning walk.
Okay, this is an iconic photo, actually. This is like, just, you know, this is in Montreal. And this was before the group of us took off for the UK, and we stopped in Montreal to get the blessings of Srila Prabhupada. And Rukmini Devi on the far right was given initiation, Prabhupada shining on her beads. And then the rest of us, the only one missing in the photo is is Janaki. And Guru Das probably took the photo, so that's why you don't see him. And Sham Sundar's not, or they might have been out of range. But anyway, we all got Gayatri Mantra. And I remember going up the stairs to the Montreal temple. It was an upstairs situation. And Himavati said, so you're going to get second, you're going to get Brahman initiation. And I said, what's that? And she goes, more mantras to chant.
So this little series here is about obeisances. Somehow ISKCON has changed a little bit. Formerly, women would also offer full dandavats to Srila Prabhupada in his presence. That was acceptable. And now, for whatever reason, we don't see that done. But it's actually mentioned in the Bhagavatam in several places. This is one. One should offer obeisances unto the Lord with a mind humbled through devotion, while offering dandavats by falling on the ground like a rod.
Nice.
Instructions to women in regulative devotional service from the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam. And we see that even the students in the Gurukul, the female students in the Gurukul, were also trained like that and did it in front of Prabhupada to his pleasure. And in the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam, Kasyapa Muni instructs his wife, Aditi, one should with great delight and satisfaction offer obeisances falling straight like a rod, dandavats.
Able. So this, where's the one, the dancing on the rooftop that's missing?
Yeah, because we have to switch it this way. That one is hidden.
Okay. Anyway, what's going on here is street Harinam Sankirtan in New York City, where sometimes they would do a spontaneous dramatic enactment on the street, on a street corner. So here you see two of the top players in the Bhaktivedanta Players, which was a group of extremely, extraordinarily talented young devotees, many of them with a background in theater, such as Rasagya and Sudama, who was the one with the blackface. And there were so many incredible productions, but one of the ones they did was called The Age of Kali. And Rasagya's role was Sin. And one time they did the drama in the temple at 55th Street, which was one of the early New York editions. And this was a big, Prabhupada called it the skyscraper building temple. One floor, it had a theater, a beautiful theater room, stage, curtains, chairs with the, the reclining floor, the whole thing. And they're doing this drama. And after the drama, some of the young men, at the time young, they came to Prabhupada's quarters and they lodged a complaint. And their complaint was they didn't think that Rasagya should be playing that role. And with a bit of a smile, I can say she just did it so well. But Prabhupada was listening to them, and there was a rose on his desk that he picked up. And he was holding it between his fingers. He was listening. I think he was like twirling it. And then he commented that when a non-devotee sees a flower such as a rose, they think, oh, let me take this and give it to my girlfriend and we can enjoy. But the devotee, when they see a rose, immediately is thinking, let me take this rose to Krishna so he can enjoy. So in a very nice way, the mentality of the young men was nicely corrected.
This was one of the first Guru Pujas. Prabhupada started it, as we recall, in March of 1973. Here he's receiving the worship from the devotees and having this beautiful exchange of flowers with one of his female followers. And after his classes, this is in San Diego, he would have this plate of Prabhupada cookies and very patiently give out a cookie to each of the children. Oops, sorry. This is 1972 in Jaipur at the Pandal program. There were thousands of people in attendance. And Prabhupada watched as Yamuna Devi performed the very first Abhishek with the small deities of Sri Sri Radha Govinda. And thereby it was understood that the deities who are worshipped today in the Brooklyn temple were installed.
They were also the deities that were, not the small ones, but the large Radha Krishna Govinda. They were also present for the Pandal program.
And it was at this same program that Tamal Krishna Maharaj accepted sannyas.
This would be in the UK. Many of you may recognize Mandaki. And the other lady next to Srila Prabhupada was Prita Devi Dasi. And the young man next to Mandakini, Digvijay, was her husband. And the fellow in between me and Srila Prabhupada, he's now departed, but his body, his was Kiradakshayi Vishnu. And again, Srila Prabhupada's attention to these small Vaishnavas. Again, Janaki and Srila Prabhupada. Actually, in Surat, I just have to say it was so extraordinary. The whole town, literally the whole town, would shut down and greet Srila Prabhupada. And every morning there was a Harinam, and the route would be published in the morning paper. So the people of the town were ready for this Harinam to come to their street. And the streets were beautifully decorated from building to building with banners and flags and mango leaves. And I don't know where these people would come from, but they'd come from wherever they came from and giving us garlands to the point we almost couldn't breathe. We'd have to remove some. It was such a wonderful reception for Srila Prabhupada. It's a park, this is San Francisco, Golden Gate Park by Stowe Lake, which was his favorite walking place at that time.
This is Srimati Devi Dasi assisting Prabhupada for the ceremony to lay the cornerstone in Juhu. From a letter, we are Vaishnavas. We are not concerned with male or female position in life. That is simply bodily conception of life. It is not spiritual. Whether one is male or female, it doesn't matter. Simply chant Hare Krishna and follow the 4 regulative principles and your life will be perfect. From 1975.
Actually, I looked up on Facebook and the letter was addressed to Jennifer. And later on, she became initiated, although I think it was after Srila Prabhupada's departure, but from what I could tell from recent postings, still active. Mukhi Devi Dasi, the president of the largest ISKCON community in North America, 1,500 members. And she's their fearless, wonderful leader. She loves them and they love her.
I think for 11 years, she's been there for president for a long time. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
So the final snapshot here, this was a few years ago in Vrindavan on Srila Prabhupada's annual Disappearance Day festival. But every single one of these beautiful Vaishnavis is one of his direct daughters, starting on the left in her 4-handed form, Kusha Devi Dasi. Next to her is Nirakula Devi Dasi, the wife of Vishaka. And my brain has dropped a name from Australia. Maybe the name will come back. Got a Chittaguna here. Narayani Devi Dasi Ki Jai. And my brain has also dropped her name, but wonderful god sister, her husband is To. And the fool amongst the jewels, Malati Devi Dasi. And
Moksharupa.
yeah.
Mahadevi.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm so sorry we've gone over time. We meant to leave time for some discussion and comments, but already past the time.
Hare Krishna, Vishaka and Malati Prabhu, if you have time, we've arranged for there to be more time on our side.
Oh.
So I think it's depending if you have time. Is that okay?
I'm
So
okay.
Malati.
Okay. Is that okay, Malati Prabhu?
We're here to serve you.
And that was just so beautiful. We didn't have the heart to stop it, nor the desire to. I will just read through the questions. There's been quite a few, and I'm just going to go in order in which they came in. The first one says,
why don't you discriminate a bit in the, so you don't get repetition or something,
Yeah, sure. I'll check out for repetition.
Okay.
Yes. The first one says, why aren't there women Shiksha or Diksha gurus, or are there?
Siksha gurus, yes, absolutely. Diksha gurus, there should be. If we live long enough, we may see it in our own lifetime. This is a topic that you can't just blow off with a couple of word answers. It's definitely complex. And in explaining things, then it could come off as being critical to certain people. So would like to avoid that. But it's there. There is no objection. It's understood that. There's just a few persons who are disturbed by the idea of anyone in a sari having anything to do. Not only do they not want them to be gurus, they don't even want them to be anything. They don't even want them to be seen. Out of sight, out of mind. And there's a strong, there's strong voices. And I mean, and there's some women who are also of that same opinion. But it was not Prabhupada's mood. And he's the one who wrote, I want all of you, to my dear spiritual sons and daughters, I want all of my spiritual sons and daughters to initiate. And he gave it time, even, I think it was like 75. So it wasn't Prabhupada's agenda to omit the women from any realm of service. But, you know, Krishna is very clever. Sometimes you have to prove yourself one way or the other. And sometimes there's some, just like in Vrindavan, there would sometimes be some so-called obstacles, but they would always be overcome. And it's my belief and deep hope that this little hitch in the road will soon be removed, because frankly, we need all the help we can get in spreading this Krishna consciousness movement. He constantly was depending on all of us, in his words, to push on this movement.
Thank you, Maji Prabhu. The next one says, sometimes a husband may not encourage his wife to preach on the front line. How do we understand this?
Vishaka?
It's probably need to know more details about that. Ordinarily, devotees want to encourage each other in their service. But if perhaps the wife is neglecting her children, maybe he wouldn't encourage, the husband in that case wouldn't encourage, or if she's neglecting her home. We have to not interfere with our priorities. You know, if one's a mother, the priority is the child, certainly. But we'd have to really know more details about that before we could give a more definitive answer.
Sure. This next question is to Malati Prabhu. Could you please narrate the touching story of when you were cooking for Prabhupada and his godbrothers in Mayapur? We've heard it from Giriraj Maharaj. We'd really like to hear it from you.
Hare Krishna. I'm just laughing because 2 nights ago I was doing a broadcast and to Tuaco, and this came up. I just did. I can fast forward it, move it along, you know. But essentially, the occasion and the time was the first gathering of devotees, Western devotees, disciples of Prabhupada in Mayapur. Mayapur was completely undeveloped. There wasn't even a chaiwala stand anywhere on Bhakti Siddhanta Road, Bhakti Vedanta Marg as it was called. It was just a dirt trail on the top of the levee. And our project was rice paddies, with the exception of the small Bhajan Kutir where Srila Prabhupada stayed, that little building that still is there with the grass roof, thatched roof. So Prabhupada had gone ahead with his secretary, who was my husband Shamsundar, and his current servant, to meet the few devotees who were already there. And myself and others came along via train, via bus. We got there. And I remember upon arriving, like, thinking I should have some kind of overwhelming spiritual feeling arriving here in Sri Mayapur is such a saintly, holy place, birthplace of Mahaprabhu, and Srila Prabhupada's here. But to be very honest, I was completely like, bewildered about everything at the moment. And I didn't see any places for us to stay. There was only one water source that I could see, which was a hand pump. And because there was no drainage, it was just like muddy all around it. And then the next thing I know, somebody came up and said, okay, I'm going to show you your kitchen. Well, that meant that I would be cooking for Prabhupada. It hadn't been discussed, but I kind of knew that it was likely to happen. So I had brought a container, a metal trunk with some kitchen supplies, including 2 stoves, small stoves, like a hand pump kerosene, those ones that blow up in your face, and then a bucket with some mud and some kind of stones in between, covered with 2 iron bars at the top for the pot to sit. So I went and I surveyed my kitchen. The kitchen was actually on the back side of the Bhajan Kutir, right outside. In other words, there wasn't actually a real kitchen. Just I would be cooking there. And my day was, it seemed to me I was like living the battlefield of Kurukshetra every day. I had a husband to care for and a daughter. There was no facilities at all for any type of ordinary, dealings like, washing your clothes, drying your clothes, all this stuff. It was just so rudimentary. And, the water from the hand pump, etc. And the wonderful tents that they had provided for us had holes in them. So when it rained, which it did, everything got soaking wet. And at those days, we traveled with these big, fat cotton sleeping bags. So, oh my God, those things got wet. It was like a disaster. So that was one thing, But then I would have to go and I'd have to confront with as much humility as I could to the treasurer to get the Lakshmi to make the purchases for the meal of the day, because there was no refrigerator. There was no way to keep more than, you just took what you needed for the day and then go back the next day. And the treasurer's really, I won't say his name because he's probably the guru of quite a few of you here. And needless to say, the treasurer has a very important role to play in managing any project. And the easiest way he can manage is just saying no to whatever anybody asked for some money, which meant he would say no, and then I'd have to prove myself why I would need the amount that I was asking for. And then I'd have to go take a boat to Navadvip, going over the Ganga. And that was another battle, because I would walk down, but then in between where you would leave the road and get on the boat, there was a self-appointed watchman who would bar your way, he would just bar your way and demand money. He had no role, it was not a real position, but if you wanted to get around him, you either had to be very fierce or just pay him. And when he saw, white lady, his eyes got really big and his dreams were even bigger. So he was really trying to get money out of me. And I didn't have any more money, and except to the pice, pice is like the smallest amount of money. You don't even have it anymore. I just had exactly what I needed. So that meant I had to fight with him. Then I'd get on the boat, and they didn't have tickets in those days. You just paid directly to the boat. Another fight. Then you get over the river and you go back up, and there's another guy, another fight. Then you get a rickshaw and there's another fight. And you go to the city market, there's another fight. You go to the fruit walla, there's another fight. And then if I had to get some type of dairy or curd, sometimes he'd have me pick up Mishti dye from this one reputable place. Well, one more fight. And then on the way back, the same thing. But on the way back, once I got to our side of the river, I would have to take a rickshaw because of the groceries and etc. So by the time I got back to our place, I was already kind of wiped out, but there was no time to do anything except start cooking. And my meditation was throughout all of this, before I cooked, during cooking, and after cooking, was how can I please Srila Prabhupada? That was really all I was thinking about. And he would usually give some comments about the cooking if I didn't do something, correctly. And it seemed like there was a few things that I didn't do correctly sometimes. Just to give a quick one is that I was going to make this eggplant sabji, and it required having very small pieces of the eggplant cut up. So I did that. And that day, a little pride crept into me. I was thinking that I think I got it right today. I was not, it just was in my mind. I thought I did okay that day. I bring in the plate. He takes a spoon into the eggplant sabji, and he goes, "Oh, so you are feeding me worm?" Somehow or other, in one of those little square pieces of eggplant, a little worm missed my knife, but when he got in the hot boiling water, he came out, and of course he perished. And what should Prabhupada get with that worm? So I was just, my pride went right down, it was like a little smashed. And still, okay, I'd be more careful. So then a few days later, I was thinking, okay, I think I got it today. And I really felt like I'd done everything pretty good that day. And I bring the plate in. And if you've ever cooked for Prabhupada or heard about it, you know that on the side of the plate, you would have a little salt, a little black pepper, some chopped up pieces of ginger, and fresh slices of nimbu, the lime. So I brought it in, and he looks and he goes, "Oh, so much salt." I mean, the salt wasn't in the prep, it was on the side, but somehow or other, when he said that, "Oh, so much salt," I thought, I'm not doing a very good job here. I just can't manage to do the right thing. I'm not pleasing him. So I was thinking, maybe somebody else should cook. And later on, so I managed to get through that day, but then I was thinking, okay, I'm going to find somebody else to cook, and I'll tell Prabhupada tomorrow. Well, tomorrow, and I mean, to see how my consciousness was, as soon as I had this plan, I started to feel a little relieved. My anxiety kind of went down a few notches. So the next day, it was announced that Prabhupada's godbrothers are coming to lunch. So I thought, okay, well, I won't be cooking today because these godbrothers have been very critical of Srila Prabhupada, including the fact that he had a lady cooking for him. So I didn't go to him to find what he wanted that day. And the next thing you know, somebody says, "Prabhupada's calling you. Prabhupada wants you." So I went there, and he starts telling me what he wants for lunch. So I realized, okay, not the time to tell him I'll get another cook. I'll cook today, and then I'll tell him tomorrow. So I did the cooking, and it was only for Prabhupada. There was a nun Prabhu who was a beautiful devotee, godbrother Srila Prabhupada, was staying with us, and he was an excellent cook. And he did the cooking for the Vaishnava gentleman who came. So after I finished the cooking, I went inside the little hut, the little back area before you get to the door. I mean, it's inside, but there's a door that separates that little back space from the regular part of the building, the little Bhajan Kutir where Prabhupada was. And the door was simply a rice bag, an empty rice bag, cut open, so it was just hanging there. Not so eloquent as we would later become, not so elegant. So I pushed the door aside, this piece of rice sack, and I looked in, and it was just an amazing darshan. We had a little electricity at that time, very little, one or two places, maybe 2 or 3 places, but there would just be like a wire with a light bulb on the end. So there was that light bulb, and Prabhupada was at the back of the room, And his godbrothers were flanking on the side. There was either 3 or 4. 3 I remember, not positive on the 4th. But Prabhupada himself was absolutely glowing that he was outshining the light bulb. I mean, it was a pretty dim light bulb, but still, Prabhupada was just glowing brilliantly. And I was looking from side to side, seeing these godbrothers who up until that point, we kind of had this idea in our mind, oh, these Gaudiya men, you know, we kind of didn't respect them in our minds and maybe our speech very well. But suddenly I saw them in person and I could see that they were very saintly elderly Vaishnavas. And I became intimidated to go inside. But at the same time, I had to go inside. I had to bring the plate. So what I did was I took my sari over my head like this, with my hands out with the plate on it. I'm on my knees. I'm walking on my elbows and my knees, bringing the plate to Prabhupada. I put it down, and as I'm putting it down, he said, "Yes, she cooks for me." He paused, and I criticize her. The minute he said that, I just had this opening, like I realized my consciousness had not been proper. You know, I was taking his instructions, his corrections as criticism in a mundane way. And each day my meditation, how can I please you, Srila Prabhupada? And he's telling me, well, like this, like that, and I wasn't getting it. So when he said that, it was just like, even though my head was still covered, like, you know, light came through to me. And as I started crawling back out, he goes, so he had said, yes, she cooks for me, and I criticize her, and I start going out. And he goes, but she would slit her throat for me, and I would do the same for her. So even though I was the object of his comment, I was a person there, I understood immediately that this was his way of explaining to these very saintly gentlemen the relationship between him and his disciples. Because in fact, that was the mood at that time, not out of oppression, but out of love. We would do anything for him, and he was the same for us. And because we knew that, we were his willing servants. So that's that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd like to, we have about 10 minutes. I'd like to include a question from Facebook. The question is, how do we practically approach obstacles to the movement when it often feels like our bhakti is crushed by negativity towards those in a female body? We can see Srila Prabhupada wouldn't have wanted it, but it can often be oppressive, even now in our temples. So how do we practically approach these obstacles?
Vishaka?
It can be very challenging, no doubt, to find discrimination on the part of devotees who should not at all be seeing the bodily differences, but rather encouraging everyone. It's definitely challenging. I think one important thing to do is to find compatible association, either in the locality where you are, or now we have this facility by the internet. You can associate with people all around the world. So find people that will encourage you, that have the same understanding that you have, and associate with them through email, through WhatsApp, through Zoom. And if they're there in person, so much the better. We have a little reading group. Every week we're reading now from Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it's very enlivening. It's just a group of ladies, and we progressively go through, we discuss points that we don't understand, and encourage each other. So I would say basically association is the answer to that. And please know that if you're feeling discouraged, That is not something that Prabhupada wants. He wants all his followers to be encouraged and should be encouraged because we're on this glorious path. It's a joyful path. The process itself is joyful. And we, along the way, we should only be there to see the good in each other and try to evoke each other's enthusiasm.
Thank you. Another question on the Zoom chat. Certain women do not want to stick to the traditionally prescribed roles of wife, mother, cook, and want to pursue academic career excellences along with being a preacher. What advice would you give them?
Malati, Prabhu?
Well, any and all of those can be a full-time occupation. And any and all of them can be dovetailed in Krishna consciousness, particularly as a wife or mother. I would find it a little challenging to do all three. I think there has to be some priority setting. And I'm referring in my mind to a letter, actually a couple of letters that I've had from Srila Prabhupada, who in the course of the letter, which was dealing with the, activity of being a grihastra, and at the same time a devotee. And by the way, we were, we never had a regular house because baby was born, and then we came to the UK, then we came to India. So we were always like out there. Now that we use that front lines, that we were like on the front lines. But I think that, you have to be a little careful in your consideration. It doesn't all have to be right now. And certainly caring for a family and a child is a service that is extraordinarily important because we've lost so many of our children, unfortunately, for different reasons. So I think that waiting a little bit isn't harmful. And Prabhupada indicated that to me in a couple of times. He said, when your daughter is grown, then, he indicated that now's not the time for whatever, but when your daughter's grown, then you can. Sometimes he said a little grown. So I think that it's up to the person, but they have to, since the person here is likely a lady, consider where they are in their devotional career. And perhaps it might be, if you're a mother and a wife at this moment, you might want to prioritize that over some of the other things, which you can do at any time later. Or if you want to try to do it all at once, be prepared for some high levels of stress.
That's a very practical point. Just one question that maybe we're ending with, this is a few minutes left, but currently in Durban, South Africa, we're studying the third canto, which is focusing on the pastime of Kadama Muni and Devahuti. And personally, as we're going through the verses, some of them are hard to digest. And I was listening to your comment about the devotee, the female devotee, I can't remember her name, but who was very qualified, who was really good at the bhajans and different aspects of spiritual life. And then the husband who was saying, my wife doesn't listen, I want to take snap. And Prabhupada says, you should listen to your wife. And that is seems to be completely a 180-degree opposite as to what those purports are saying. So how do we reconcile this? The Prabhupada we find in the letters, the Prabhupada that you've experienced, and the Prabhupada we read in the Shastra.
I think an important factor to consider here is not to take one particular statement of Prabhupada and prioritize that, but try to see the body of his gift, of the instructions that he gave. For instance, on one hand, he will say a wife should not serve a fallen husband. On the other hand, he will emphasize the chastity of women. you know, to how to balance these things. So if we only read one portion, we may misunderstand and think the wife has to be something that is not practical or realistic. So it's so important to see the body of knowledge, and also to study Prabhupada's letters, to study his personal example. He was very, very practical, and not in any dream idea about, you know, my disciples are the perfect husbands, nothing like that. So sometimes it seems we misunderstand and think Prabhupada was impractical or idealistic as far as instructing his disciples. But as you can see from that exchange with Tejas and Madeira, he wasn't like that. He was very...
And I'd also say that his response, you know, your wife is a very intelligent person, so you can do what she says. I mean, there was also a bit of humor there, because obviously Teja was not fit to become a sannyasa, at least at that time. And especially given the reason that he gave, you know, so, you know, Prabhupada could often diffuse things in a wonderful way by interjecting a little subtle humor.
Okay. Okay, there's a comment by Jadurani Mataji. Hare Krishna Mataji. Actually, the PP you talked about is in a major way due to the Indian influence. A lot of new rule and practices that are from Indian perspective, because there are people who believe Prabhupada didn't complete proper Vaishnava behavior training for his disciples. When we study Srila Prabhupada's instructions in all their forms, it's obvious that Srila Prabhupada was thorough in his training. Your insights, please.
Yes, that's it. Prabhupada was thorough in his training. And another point to remember is this was July 67, where we really only had the first canto available in 3 parts, because everything I have to teach you is in these books. That was when there was only the first canto. What to speak of to the present, later on to the present.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking this time and spending it with us. It's been really a gift, a priceless gift for us. And especially the extra time going through these questions. I can see from all the comments that have been flying on this chat group and flooding through that everybody is really grateful for having this wisdom and this connection to Srila Prabhupada. So thank you so much, Vishaka Prabhu, Malati Prabhu, for spending this time with us.
I could mention that these slides are available on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you put in Srila Prabhupada's Shower of Mercy, it comes up as a little 10-minute film, all the pictures. Srila Prabhupada's Shower of Mercy on YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, so if you didn't get that, we'll just maybe post it also in the WhatsApp group, Srila Prabhupada's Shower of Mercy. I did see someone gave the link to that video on the group chat, so because people have been asking for the pictures. So yes. So we'll move, the next session is at 7:30. We've just adjusted the timings, so bear with us.
What is the time where you are now? What is the time?
7:10.
Okay, so I just want to translate it to my time. Okay.
Sure. So thank you so much, and please stay tuned, viewers, devotees, Vaishnavis, for the rest of the retreat. Over this weekend, there's lots in store. And remember to log on a little bit earlier for the next session so that we have it's not a bunched up entry time. Okay. So thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So nice to be with all of you.
It's wonderful.
Beautiful Vaishnavis.